It has been about a year, last year on October 7th, when Hamas and many Palestinian civilians with Hamas have entered into Israel and have killed and mutilated and done terrible things to many many people of Israel. Um, and they've also took many hostages with just I think a little less than 100 over steam still being somewhere in Gaza. Some were rescued, some were killed uh, during either rescue attempts or basically just by Hamas, and some have been gotten back by negotiation. But today we'll try to take this day and look back on this year and try to get some important, I think, ideas or important observations that we had over the last year since we've been focusing on this, and also important principles that unfortunately I think not just the world but also Israel hasn't really learned, despite many recent successes. The fact that there are still many things that need to be done, and many things that are not being done. And I think it is because of those principles that I think Israel currently is lacking. So the just a little bit before, the always the problem with episode like this, when you try to take 1 hour and try to look back a year, is there is so much to talk about that you almost don't know what to talk about. So in this way, I'd like to invite also everyone in the chat and the super chat and the members chat to also let us know what this year has been for you, especially if you've been following us, and maybe we can have some good discussions. We can go through many things. I have about, I don't know, 30 different things we can talk about, and we'll try to go through them. We might not do it chronologically, or it's definitely not going to be just some sort of summary like this happened on this day. More of a discuss different things, and also the most important, I think, takeaways or principles when it comes to those specific things. So joining me today is Marco and Richard. Hey guys, welcome to the reality show. We started a bit late, but we are now online, and I'd like to start with Marco. Just give me your opinion from the last year, and if you can summarize anything, just some opening thoughts.
Yeah, certainly I would never thought a year later we will be still here talking about the same event. Of course, you would always expect some sort of thinking and meditation about the attack itself, because it's been such a horrific event that at no point you could ever forget it or ignore it. Even if Israel went in properly and got rid of Gaza, Hamas, and everybody else, and by now we didn't have a war still occurring, you still would think about the victims, about what happens, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, the magnitude of the event in itself is just a notch below the Holocaust. And it's not an overstatement. Here, this event effectively showed the kind of evil that can be unleashed if civilization doesn't stand up for its own existence. Historians always try to explain why the Roman Empire fell. How did it happen that such a rich and culturally and economically rich empire fell and disappeared in history? Well, I'm beginning to see the answers here today. On this attack as put the spotlight on so many failures in the West and in the civilized world, and highlight how evil the side that want to destroy civilization, the side who's pushing death as the highest value, how evil they can be. And we knew already that Middle Eastern and Muslim-based, Islam-based civilization are thousands of years, well, a century away from being properly civilized, as you would expect a human being to be. And we knew that this kind of stuff they do is barbaric. But this particular attack has shown not only during the attack itself what the people of Gaza did. And again, I don't like to make the difference Hamas and the Gazans, because first of all, if you want to identify yourself, you wear a uniform. They don't, because Hamas and the Gazans are the same thing. The Palestinian Hamas are the same thing. So, I don't like to make the distinction in the first place. But the kind of evil that they unleashed, the action that they took, is something that you cannot explain just by talking about their counterculture. No amount of bad philosophy can explain what the action were and what they did with it, because ultimately part of the fault is ours, which we enabled and allowed them to behave in this kind of way by not standing up to them, not showing them what the correct behavior and the correct values are. We are in the West much more advanced technologically, so we could wipe them out, fairly quickly. Israel could wipe out the Palestinians fairly easily militarily, but we choose not to do. We've done it in the past. We've done it, since after the war, really. Not a war was won by the West in a decent way since the end of the war, Second War, because since then we've lost. The reason why we are civilized, we've lost the certainty behind our moral standing, and that is dragging us down and effectively emboldening the people who are against morality and civilization and peace ultimately.
Yeah, this is a very strange moment, an anniversary of something like this, isn't it? Because you're thinking in two different ways. You're focusing on imagining a year ago today and what was witnessed and endured on that horrendous day. And you're thinking about the specific events which were truly horrendous. And you're thinking about what has happened since and the bigger picture in terms of history, and taking that step back and looking at what even that day itself, when taken in context, reveals about what existed before it that was not recognized and what existed after it that was not recognized. Some of what was not recognized, of course, was the widespread anti-Semitism that existed well ahead of October the 7th, that has come to light all over the place, and been brought into daylight and into full view. But when you're commenting on it, as we have been obviously across the last year, sometimes you're focused on a live event that's taking place almost immediately, or you're in close proximity to that event. You're describing the details of it. But then sometimes you need to, an anniversary is also the chance to take a step back and see what it really means in the bigger picture. Of course, I'm not talking about when like determinist Marxists talk about, are you on the right side of history, as if it's some determinist laid out path that is going to, all leads towards the revolution. I'm talking about understanding all of the cultural elements that take place within the Middle East that we're talking about, the region we're talking about, and just as importantly, within the West and people's response to it. And I think we find ourselves kind of at a big crossroads right now in even making that assessment. Because obviously Israel's been doing really well lately in terms of fighting back, and Hezbollah in all the pages, and Hamas being all but wiped out within Gaza to a large extent. And yet you've got the big question mark hanging over are they going to go for the source of the problem, the Iranian problem, or is that it? Because what we praise in terms of all the other steps amount to nothing, to be honest, nothing, if we stop here and Iran is not dealt with. because that is the difference between us taking the crossroads, which means that we're turning the world is being turned away from terrorism and the evil of Islamicism, or whether Islamicism and that evil is going to be allowed to thrive everywhere, and given the extra impetus of the gloss of academia and of Western bodies such as the UN, etc. That's where we're at right now. So we're kind of trying to make an assessment upon what did it mean then, what does it mean since, and where is it going? Because that's going to determine what it means now. That's a tough call.
And yeah, and talking about the fact that again, the last attack on Israel that came out of Iran, there was the first one in April, and now there was the second one just last week, and we still don't have any answer, and we haven't seen an answer to the last one either. Yesterday we were talking a little bit about the fact that Iran has closed its airspace, that it might have some information about some upcoming Israeli attack, but we haven't seen anything so far. So again, when it comes to many people are trying to, I think rightfully so, be a bit more optimistic, especially after the last 2 weeks. Since not even since the killing of Nasrallah, because even before that, there was a good ramp up, and even a few months back, if you go example, the assassination of Haniyeh, or the death of Iranian president, but it's we don't know who did that. So I definitely want to go to some more topics, but let's actually watch just quickly one video to sort of encapsulate this intro. There has been a video published by the IDF, which I have to find, which okay, I cannot find it, so we'll play it a bit later. Maybe if you can talk just for a second about what they'll see.
I can tell you a little bit about the video. In essence, it's just because trying to find something to show that can capture like the crucial images of October the 7th without being mawkish or wallowing in it, but expressing the horrendous nature of it and to get over the emotive effect is quite a hard thing to do. But I think what the IDF have put together here is a very good job of doing that, because it captures the key images that to my mind have been largely evaded by so much of the commentary since. There was obviously substantial commentary initially, or references to it or pictures of it at the time, but they have been wiped out of most consciousnesses for most of the period of the past year. And I think that in itself is a telling point we can comment on.
Yeah, sorry. Just give me about 10 seconds. Sorry for this. This should have been ready, and it's not, so I'm just gonna put it here, and now we can have it. So the video is just about a minute long, and it's not too graphic from what I've seen. So, but let's talk about it later. So many of you might recognize some of the clips played there. I think it's a relatively good sort of combination of different clips we've seen of the horrible events, as well as it's always really disturbing to see sort of like the location when it's just normally there, and then when some horrific event happens, and it can be all sorts of things. So a really good video done by the IDF, real short, just to sort of remind ourselves what has happened. But now going into we are currently doing introduction to logic course, which is by Leonard Peikoff. So in that one we have discussed a lot of different fallacies when it comes to argumentation. For people asking what is the name of the clip, you can find it on the Twitter of the IDF, I believe, and also on YouTube on their official channel, so you can just check there. But when it comes to course, there's the idea of a sort of appeal to emotion, basically. Just we just show this video, and you automatically are supposed to feel in a certain way. And of course, the way the video is done, it is showing what has happened, and you will have a certain emotion. But it's I think it's a good start, but we definitely have to talk about the broader aspects and the actual reality, not the reality of on the ground, but talking about the principles behind it, and talking about where did we go from here. So I think we had a comment which was pretty good. So let me just quickly read some super chats. We have a super chat from Robin, who has been a member for 27 months, who says, "It's been a surprise to me how anti-Israel the general public opinion is, and that people can excuse the actions of terrorists and blame the victims." I think it was, and many people are saying in the chat that, yeah, October 7th was very transformative day for them, not in the day itself, but the reaction of the world, because many people even when it comes to politicians, have not really, well, in some cases haven't even condemned October 7, and in many cases started calling for a ceasefire on the day of October 7, on the day after, or I think when it comes to people from the squad, the people like Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, you've seen them calling officially for a ceasefire only few days after the event. And yeah, I think it has been a wake-up moment for many people, and we've seen the similar thing. So let me just read another chat. Supicast said, "October 7 and the response to it from the pro-Palestine side really woke me up to the Palestine issue and changed my view on the conflict. I used to describe myself as an anti-Zionist." Yeah, you've really seen, and you really see, maybe that's the first thing we can sort of discuss, the idea of anti-Zionism. And it has been used, well, since October 7th, but even before that, as a sort of like an escape from what they actually are, which is anti-Semites. You can have a problem with the way maybe you have a problem with the way Israel government works, or what it stands for. But what we've seen a lot is this inability to even condemn October 7, or to basically say something needs to be done about Hamas. We've seen a lot of evasion when it comes to this, and I think a lot of it is rooted in anti-Semitism. And it's not even that hard to understand why many people would accept the idea that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, because of how ridiculous anti-Semitism is. When you break it down, you are hating someone just because they were born with. When it comes to Jewish people, it's hard to even what is the hatred for, because it's not like you're born Jewish, you're not born with a certain religion, but this sort of very irrational hatred just because you are associated with a certain group of people. It's really hard to believe that someone would have it, but as we've seen day after day since October 7th, that's exactly what we've seen, this immense hatred for Israel that is rooted in something much deeper than simply, we just don't like the state of Israel. But let me go to Marco.
Yeah, as I said earlier on, the post event has highlighted lots of issues that were effectively coming up to the surface. As you were saying, until a year ago, anti-Semitism was still somewhat frowned upon, especially here in we're in London. So here in
I
London,
mean, just to bring up an actual example, just think of when Kanye West came out against the Jews. That was a huge problem. Like, he was rightfully so. He lost many deals. I think his deal with, was it Adidas or Nike? I think one of them. And yeah, I don't want to really joke too much on this episode since it's October 7th. But someone was saying if only he came out against Jews 1 year later, he would be applauded instead of criticized.
yeah, and that's the tragedy, isn't it? Because anti-Zionism used to be a euphemism for anti-Semitism. So you could be openly anti-Zionist or not anti-Semitic. So they used to get away with it using those phrases. But now, since then, we've seen the reaction of the West. I mean, just cast your mind back, 2, 3 years before, when a criminal was killed during an arrest. George Floyd. The United States nearly went up in flames with riots, because suddenly they discovered this terrible anti whatever systemic racism and systemic hate for everyone, blah 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 blah, and then suddenly a bunch of civilians get attacked in Israel in their own home during the attendance to a music festival. And suddenly, everybody in the West, the same people were in the streets chanting against the horror of violence, of the systemic violence and oppression, those kind of bullshit. Suddenly, the killing civilian becomes acceptable. And not only that, but the Jews who were the attack one, the state of Israel was under attack, is suddenly pointed at as the aggressor. Suddenly, it's Israel's fault. Everything that's happened was an attack on Israel, and today is accepted by everyone to talk about occupation and this kind of made-up accusation, genocide. Genocide has become the joke in the last year. I mean, there's even the UN has even taken on a case to try and prove something which is blatantly wrong and just viciously an accusation viciously directed to Israel. So we've seen all this kind of hate spewing out from the West. This kind of anti-Semitism was just bubbling under the surface. And virtually every single lefty country and politicians has showed themselves to be really anti-Semitic in their very DNA. The very nature of most of the Marxist movements are openly anti-Semitic. It's not a surprise, for example, in London, when you see a pro-Hamas, anti-Israel march, you always have boards and placards pre-printed by the socialist worker and all those kind of institutions. Unions, labor unions are always the forefront of anti-Semitism. They're not very shy about that. So all this kind of hate that was just hidden under the surface suddenly came out. And we were unprepared, civilized people who support Israel because it's the moral thing to do, found themselves unprepared because all this thing was leaked slowly. Everybody knew about anti-Zionism is not right and those kind of stuff, blah blah blah. It was leaked into the fabric of our own society, and most people accepted this kind of insinuation and rumors about the Jews are this and that. So based on a historic anti-Semitism, who has been sort of dampened or at least hidden by a very thin veneer civilization, suddenly we've seen this eruption of hate, and because, as I mentioned earlier on, the West has lost its moral certainty because Raka was talking about the issue is skepticism, really. Everybody, which comes out from really accepting multiculturalism, it primes you to accept that somebody's culture is as good as yours. You're not any better than somebody else, but so you stop realizing actually, yes, there is a good and a bad, and we know in the West that because we protect individual rights and freedom as a one of the highest values, we know that we are morally better than this uncivilized theocrats that trying to spread caliphates all over the world. But we weren't ready to fight back, and we were effectively caught on the back foot on this one.
I think where we stand now as individuals is the fact that you can't reclaim any naivety you had prior to October the 7th without it being evasion. So you can recognize that you were naive prior to October the 7th, that you gave people too much credit for not being anti-Semitic, for seeing the good versus the evil. And afterwards, you have to face up to the fact that people aren't the same as you thought they were. Your disappointment can't be undone. You can't unsee the kind of placards they've held up and the kind of things that they've supported. And that itself is quite a transitional thing for your own person and your circle of contacts, whether it's who you watch on TV or whatever, or whether it's who you associate with in your personal, private, whatever lives. I think that IDF clip that we showed there, the part of it that most hits me in the gut is seeing the hundreds and hundreds of young people running across that open area, running from death. And it's because you know that they were there celebrating life, and you know that they have been targeted to be killed, and that whoever falls and whoever's captured is killed or raped or whatever. And you know that happened, and you know that wasn't collateral. That wasn't the accidental happening to civilians. That was the intent of those chasing them, or those who came for them from the sky across the border, etc. And to see all that, and then to put it into the context of what I just talked about, the fact that other people will excuse or evade or ignore it, and what we'll talk about other abstract issues that they don't understand or don't know about, but we'll just trot it out, whether it's the occupation line or the stolen land or any of the other nonsense spewed out as justification for those people running from death. That's the kind of stuff you can't undo when you look at the world again. So you have to retain your positivity despite that, but you do have to recalibrate for sure. You have to recalibrate the entire way you look at the world, where it is now, where we're heading, and what you hear from people, and really assessing the truth of what you hear from people.
So mentioning on what Marcus said earlier, PC sends us a super chat, thank you so much, who says more people screaming free Palestine in London. I'll get back to that in just a second, but also thank you Ginger for super chat. She says, meant to put this with my comment but couldn't find the dollar button. Thank you for being here this year and providing reasonable context. Yeah, something that also happened this year, after October 7, soon after, I think we had many people might not even remember, but before October 7, we had a lot of different shows, but after October 7, we became almost exclusively Israel channel and things connected to that. And the only exception is sort of the reality show Extra, where we often discuss different topics. Where was I going with this? So we've also seen a great amount of growth because of that, but sort of going to what PC said, more people screaming free Palestine in London. That's I'll connect it with two topics. The idea, what we've seen, we've seen a lot of people going to the streets. I can imagine even on today, many people are going to the streets. We had one topic ready for a while. We might do it this week, but basically, many organizations in Spain have decided to do a march on October 7, a pro-Palestinian march. Which again, you might be more inclined to support the other side, but or sort of saying, you just don't like Israel, you don't have anything against Israelis, or you don't have anything against Jews. But when you celebrate on October 7th, the day that is specifically, it's sort of like, celebrating something like 9/11. I mean, again, if someone did that, you wouldn't call them, well, they just, they just stand for some country in the Middle East. No, that it's clear that it's a hatred for a specific country that was attacked and the people there. I don't think you can you can talk about October 7 without talking about the people. Sort of connecting two topics. This many of these protests, but also with what we've now called the campus intifada. Many of these protests were happening on college campuses. Many of the presidents of those universities, such as I think Columbia is one we spoke about a lot. Many of them have resigned from their positions because of how much support for anti-Semitism there is, and how little enforcement of any school policy against these people. Because what we've seen is taking over of the college campuses, taking over of certain buildings, and nothing being done against them, really. So sort of trying to talk about that. Marco, do you have anything?
Yeah, the only problem with this kind of stuff, I mean, one of the issues we found is also that at the same time as highlighting where our weakness is, the post October the 7th is actually highlighted who our enemies are. We can now see clearly where the enemies are. And the enemies are the various institutions in the West who support this kind of behavior, the people who support the behavior, as you mentioned, the protesters in Spain, all the people who pretend not to have seen the kind of brutality that was broadcasted by the Hamas people and the Palestinians while committing them, and our politicians who are totally in the West lacking the spine and total cowards. Just to name a few: Biden, Macron, our prime minister, the previous Tory lot. But the action speak much more loudly than the press releases on the day. Take, for example, our sausage of a prime minister who declared, nice words, we stand with Israel and blah blah blah, Jewish community, blah blah blah, and we do everything we can to return the hostages. Really, the hostages are still held by the same people whose ass you covering by refusing to send material to Israel that might be used by them to help to defend themselves and to get the hostages back. And so we are being gaslit by our own establishment, university and all this kind of people, in order to believe that they are supporting Israel while taking the actions that go directly against Israel and directly in support of Hamas and all the Islamic monsters that live in the region. And as for the cases you were mentioning about the chancellors that were removed and stuff, well, it's a Pyrrhic victory, really, because these people don't disappear. They just move to a different position where they're gonna start pushing the same agenda under a different guise. So,
well, I think the president of Colombia went to work for the UK government, so that's
she actually is a member of the House of Lords, so she was never in danger of being booted out from the establishment. She knew perfectly well she was absolutely safe. The mixed economy is the perfect place where you can hide people like this who are just parasites that leech off their humanity and the productivity of other people and use it against them to create a kind of world where they are the leaders, they give the orders, and we are all following. And going down the route among our enemies, we also realize who our enemies are in terms of our countries. We've seen how evil Iran is. We've seen how many times Iran has been aiding, abetting, and supplying weapons to Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, and all these kind of people, even in the West, by propaganda stuff like that, trying to undermine our institutions. And also, let's not forget the princes of propaganda, Qatar, who are actually also hosting the leaders of Hamas, the political leaders of Hamas, who were celebrating, are caught on camera celebrating while watching the atrocity from October the 7th. They were looking while Jews were slaughtered by the people they supported, the people they are supposed to control, and they were celebrating. They were praying with their ass in the sky, all this kind of stuff. And why is Qatar allowed to have a stake in our economy, for example? Why is Qatar has got stake in Barclays, Descharges here in London, Shell? Why is Qatar behind Al Jazeera? Why is Al Jazeera allowed to spew the death-laden propaganda of the Middle East, the Islamic Middle East? And why is it that Al Jazeera, when it comes to doing the English version of Al Jazeera, they're all progressive, love life, and blah blah blah, and despite what they're saying, and the Arabic version of Al Jazeera is actually much more right-wing, conservative, pro-jihad, openly, and that's why Al Jazeera is banned in lots of Middle Eastern state, because they don't want radicalization of their own population. But we let them do it. We let them do it and take it. In the West also, Qatar is beyond Euronews, so they are in bed with the EU as well and helping them spreading the propaganda.
When you talk about the smug people who know exactly they're going to be safe, whatever, I just think of Philippe Lazzarini, knowing even at the height of that UNRWA scandal, he knew he was totally safe and he would be there as he is now. And UNRWA would receive its funding renewed, despite whatever was shown to the world, no matter the quantity of video evidence, etc., that was shown to the world. He knew he was perfectly safe, and that is a disgusting element of how the world is working right now, to be honest. What we're hearing about a lot in the UK at the moment, particularly on this anniversary, is the hostage Emily Damari, who is a British Israeli who's still held hostage in Gaza by Hamas. We obviously don't know whether she's alive or dead. She's 28 now. She turned 28 whilst in captivity, obviously, having been there for a year. And what I'm struck is her name has popped up in the past few days, and obviously her mother's been talking about her and everything, is how little I've heard of her for an entire year. The fact that I don't know her name. Now, I know the name of Nazarene Zaghari Radcliffe. I had that name rammed down my throat for years, where she was the Iranian British held in captive in Iran for several years, who we gave Iran, the UK gave Iran $400 million around the time that she was released. I'm not saying there was a connection, but it was around that time. But of course, the difference between the two is very stark. And it's because she's Israeli. It's as simple as that, really. And that's the anti-Semitism that runs through the media, because even the emotional element of it, even the caring for people and civilians, the same as the young people running from death, like I mentioned, they don't care about that because they're Israeli. And seeing that so clearly shown to you is a very harsh lesson to take, particularly if you've got, a positive outlook on life and you assume people are benevolent in the main. So there's that side of it. And then there's also the side, which I don't think we cover very often, which is the fact that many people have just got their fingers in their ears and their heads in the sand, and they don't want to know anything about any of it. So they just want to evade the entire thing. So there's plenty of people that in family members or whatever who don't bring it up ever, what's going on in Israel, at all, and therefore they don't recognise clearly. Well, maybe they do recognise and they still evade it, but to different levels, people don't recognise the fact that this is the spearhead of the fight between civilization and barbarity, and it doesn't matter that it's Israel in that context. It's just that Israel is fighting first, and what follows behind it, as history progresses, will be determined by the success or failure of that fight. And if people could see that more clearly, the principles behind that, then they would definitely have a stake in it. They would definitely understand, and that is obviously why we cover this topic so much on this channel, because that's the crux of its importance.
We also have a super chat from Bonnie, thank you so much, and a super chat from PC who says, many are non-US citizens doing that. The Department of Homeland Security should remove them from the US. So I'm not sure who specifically he's referring to, if the students or who specifically. Well, it's not even the problem, and well, it is a problem, but America has free speech. If you want to advocate for Hamas, you have a right to do so. I will, of course, still criticize it. It doesn't remove any sort of criticism from you. But when it comes to the campus intifada, and also why we talked about it, well, one, those are the education facilities. The fact that that sort of philosophy is so rampant there that it is able to take over the whole campus, and no one is doing anything about it. That was the problematic part. And also they are breaking the law by actually occupying the buildings. That was also the big part of it. And many people try to put it in the way that once in some cases, once the protests were being shut down for, again, either breaking the law or breaking the university rules or code of conduct, once that started happening, people said it that this is a suppression of free speech, which it never was. And if it was, it would be a big problem, and you'd see the First Amendment is not in the Constitution just for fun. It actually does work. And if anyone tried to, if you were shut down just for your free speech, you would be able to challenge it, or you would see many people trying to defend you. But that's not what it was about. So do you want to say that about specifically? Because I'm going to a much different point.
It is freedom of speech up to a point. When you start calling for the destruction of the Jews, the destruction of the Israeli state, intifada, which is effectively incitement to violence, all of this is incitement to violence. It's about genocide and homicide. Well, free speech goes out of the window, because this is a criminal incitement of violence, which is something you cannot do. It's asking for the initiation of violence, and we know very well that that's not allowed. You cannot ask for somebody else's rights to be taken away because you say so. So these people, what they actually do are inciting violence, are asking for a destruction of Israel. Some people don't realize what they're doing, but that's their problem. If they're ignorant and they use stuff that they don't understand, well, they will learn it once they are in a jail or something. But yeah, freedom of speech up to a point.
Yeah, I mean, it would still be a freedom of speech. If it is a freedom of speech, it is a freedom of speech. It's not like you're cutting it off at some point. When it comes to incitement of violence, from what I understand, when it comes to American law, I think it has to be against specific individuals. Even if you say something like that, kill all the Jews, it might not mean the sort of, but that, I think that's much more of a legal question, or a question for legal scholars who understand the US Constitution and in the much better way the proper role of government and free speech. So I think
what I mean, when somebody holds up a placard with a heart and the name of a proscribed terrorist organization, that's it's quite obvious what they're doing, isn't it?
Certainly.
Yeah, it is, but you have a right to do bad things, unfortunately, or rather, that's not the right way to form it, but it's
I think
I
the
don't know. Yeah.
the bigger problem that gets under my skin is like, for example, having like the Metropolitan Police here in the UK try and polish what the word jihad means as an explanation for why they didn't arrest people. Because then effectively the Met Police are writing their own signs in favor of the destruction that we're trying to highlight here.
So, just quickly, we have a bit more super chat, so thank you so much. We have a super chat from Enric who says, the West rediscovered blood labeling Jews and running with it. We have done a few episodes about that. One of them was, for example, the ICJ ruling, which we might get to. We'll see. We also have a super chat from PC who says it's going to push more Jews to move to Israel to get away from the haters. That might be an interesting thing to watch out for if the people who have dual citizenship, if they might consider moving to Israel, because we've seen terrible things happening against the Jews in the West. I mean, I've heard from many of people I know, many of my friends, or some people who appear on this channel. Some of them are not even Jewish, and they've experienced, actual anti-Semitism, like people calling them on the streets, just because they sort of look Jewish, which I don't know what that specifically means. How can you tell? But and we have one more super chat from Tragedy and Comedy, who says, Oslo here, I assume the city, at the solidarity meeting in front of the parliament. My apologies for the Norwegian government and the shouting from the Islamist supporters behind the police dogs, and my website crashed. Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of, unfortunately, and he finished with Yisrael Chai. Yeah, we've seen a lot of really bad behavior coming out of even European countries. Many of them either, we talked about yesterday about UNRWA, for example, not stopping the funding when the controversies came out, or resuming without any resolution. The fact that few of them are basically either have recognized or are planning to recognize Palestine after October 7, which just rewards them for the terrorism. Many of them joined against Israel in the ICJ. So just all-around terrible behavior from many of these. We have so much topics to go through. It's okay. Just one quick point I'd like to make. Something we've seen a lot being used is the use of casualties when it comes to Gaza. We had one episode where we discussed how the numbers, and it was always the Hamas numbers. It was always the numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas. We made several episodes about that, how badly that was being reported, how many news sites didn't even include that this organization is run by Hamas. But even then, just by using the number, you are giving it some sort of legitimacy when it deserves none. And then many people having the standard that no civilians should die ever, pretty much. That sort of standard, which again, maybe I'm being too funny for this episode, but it reminds me of one game I've seen people playing. It's called Arma 3, and it's basically sort of like a military simulator. And people were playing it for fun, but it was interesting to see how quickly you can commit war crimes if you're like not paying attention who is where. And I for a long time I was thinking, these people who have, people in the West just like talking, well, it's just, I don't like the number I see. I don't like the fact that civilians are dying, and completely separating them that from, what does it take to lead such an action? What does it take to, be in a war? What's the context? What is Hamas doing? Is Hamas helping somehow prevent civilian casualties, or is it what's actual reality on the on the other side? Trying to exaggerate with both the numbers, trying to exaggerate how many people are dying by, for example, not ever including distinguishing between militants and civilians. It's all just people dying, and forcing people to stay in the buildings where IDF is planning to attack, oftentimes hiding behind, building their infrastructure behind civilian infrastructure. Many things like that have been happening, and yet uh, and yet what the people in the West have done was exactly what Hamas wanted. Basically, just look at the number and just use the number against Israel. Don't put any context. Don't think about it. Just use it.
Yeah, I
Marco?
mean, it's been a year where we've seen a full-out attack, not only physical attack on Israel, but an attack on reality and reason, haven't we? The way their words are used and used sometimes with the opposite meaning, the way the numbers are used, the way that emotionalism is used in order to bypass the whole thinking behind thing and just look at the picture, ignore the context, and do as I say. That's the kind of attitude that's been going on there. You say something else?
I wanted to add something here.
on.
So I just wanted to say, well, what you're talking about with the numbers there is how often in the media and in conversation, people will recognize the fact that there are Hamas combatants in that number, or they will recognize the fact that Hamas hides behind, civilians in hospitals or schools or whatever. And then within moments, they've evaded it again and they've reverted to type. And that is infuriating to watch on TV, and it's infuriating to have in a conversation. At least in a conversation, you can do what Ayn Rand advised, and you can point it out, or you can at least say, "I don't agree." In any setting. I think we recently reread her essay, "How to Lead a Rational Life in an Irrational Society." Now, it's only a few pages long. It replies to everything that's going on in the world at the moment, not just the situation in the Middle East, and the ability to say I don't agree to people when they're attacking your values, rather than letting those values be attacked in front of you through your silence, is one key part of that essay. And I'd advise everybody to read it, because there's a reason why we're talking about Israel, but we're also the Ayn Rand Centre UK. There's a reason why the advice that she wrote in all of her essays and books is useful and helpful for understanding the world, for being able to interpret the principles, for being able to integrate knowledge that you find initially terrifying, upsetting, or just really hard to comprehend. And there's a reason why we're able to try and find moral clarity when we're talking about complex issues like this. So yeah, this is a moment perhaps to advise people that to take that opportunity, and that not just to watch the channel as much as you do, much as we love that, but maybe also to take that little extra step and read a little bit of Ayn Rand somewhere, please.
Yeah, and it's often you see comments from people who do not understand objectivism, and they know something about it, so they feel empowered to make a comment. Things like, why you keep talking about this has got nothing to do with objectivism. Well, if you knew what objectivism is, it's a philosophy to live life on Earth, a happy life on Earth, fulfilling life on Earth. You would know that every time you evade reality, you evade your own judgment. It goes against the purpose of living a happy life. So by ignoring the fact that Israel is the moral side in this conflict, and that civilization is being attacked by the people who decries we're talking about Israel too much, well, you should read Ayn Rand, understand what she's on about, and try and make a better life for yourself. And as for Israel, well, it probably not today, because it's still a very painful day today, but they really ought to have a good look at themselves and start thinking, realizing that the world is different from the world they were trying to paint. It's not a surprise that, well, it's not a coincidence that most of the victims in the kibbutz was actually lefty people who refused to see the evil in the Palestinians, and they were helping them, often driving them to hospitals and giving them jobs. And the Palestinians were taking these chances to learn the layout, gather information in order to launch the attack. And these were the very people who were slaughtered first. There is an article on the Substack by Razi about one of these people. And this is not an accident. The left is using Islam in order to gain power, and Islam is using the left in order to spread its message, its hate. We've seen in the West. If you set aside your ideological bias and actually stare at the facts, you will see what's happening. And something else that probably Israel should do, should realize that fighting a fight with kid gloves on, it's not going to help. Unfortunately, you should understand that if somebody is taken hostage by these animals, they are lost. You shouldn't try to send more young people to rescue them in a desperate suicide mission. You should just, adopt the animal directive. They are casualties of war. If you can rescue them, all the better. But you cannot fight a war with a hand behind your back, tied it up, and expect the other side to play the same rule. They're going to take advantage of it. That's why the push into Lebanon against Hezbollah has been so brilliant, because they haven't been playing, goody two shoes all the time. They've been trying to go for the win, and that's the only way to fight a war. And this is an existential war. So if you don't put all your might behind it, you're gonna lose.
We have a super chat from PC who says Israel has declared the Hamas military defeated. I haven't seen any news about that. So if it's true, we might.
They say something like that. I think last week they said, the main military thrust behind Hamas is defeated. Now it's more like a guerrilla war, kind of ad hoc fighting in an urban setting. But even this, it's not good enough, because Iran is still there, Qatar is still there. So if you don't address the big problems, Hamas is just a name. Somebody else will come up.
And we have someone in the chat saying, Israel falls in my lifetime, and in its place, Palestine is unified. And also he also adds, Ayn Rand called the Arabs savages, which I believe is true. And it's something we've been also saying. But this is not some race thing. This is not some, they can't be civilized. You have Arabs living in the Israel, and it's fine. They have, they can get any job they want. They can participate in the politics. Although, if you look at it's one problem I've always had with. Okay, I was about to finish that sentence with minorities, but a problem I've had with modern age politics is that oftentimes when you have minorities, instead of fully integrating into society and sort of just getting involved with politics, oftentimes you have them founding like an actual, like a minority party. Basically, in Slovakia, you have the Hungarian minority parties and many of them. And I think when you have that, it's a big problem, not to the point that I want to ban them. I want them to see that there is no, it wasn't a Freudian slip. It's not what I was saying, that the problem isn't the fact that they are founding those parties. It's more of you have to realize the issue is about the individuals, and it's not a problem. There are no issues that are evolving around the minority specifically. So you have Arabs, they can participate in the Israeli elections, in the Israeli system. but when it comes to it, many of them are basically just founding a separate Arab parties instead of joining together with different Israeli parties based on the ideology. You
Yeah.
might be a capitalist, you might be a socialist. You shouldn't be Arab first. You should be, what do I actually support when it comes to politics?
And of course, we all know Arabs or Muslim who accept the way of life and the values of the West, and they're perfectly integrated. They're still religious, which is, not perfect, but they don't go around murdering other people. They're perfectly, integrated individuals in society. So to argue that Arabs are savages just because they're Arabs, no, they're savages because they choose that kind of culture and they don't want to change it.
And to misunderstand what Rand was talking about there, and not to read also her essay called simply Racism, where she points out that racism is the lowest form of collectivism. And that if people who charge Rand with racism read that, it literally blows their minds, because it literally destroys the very concept that she could possibly be accused of it.
And then also talking about, he wants to see Palestine be united, or, well, be created. Do you really like? Is any Middle Eastern country a country that you want to live in? Like, are you looking at Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Gaza, or the parts of the West Bank? Do you look them and do you think like, wow, that's a amazing place. I really cannot wait to live? Or are you looking at countries like more like Sweden, UK, America, France, or Israel, and you look at, might have problems, but they're much better, in absolute terms. And someone says United Arab Emirates, maybe. When it comes to that, I always say don't judge a country by the capital. And I think when people talk about the United Arab Emirates, they just talk about Dubai. Dubai is in United Arab Emirates, right? Yeah, they talk about like one city and sort of like exaggerate it to the whole country. I know that United Arab Emirates has many problems, very similar to it might be good when it comes to like economics, like low taxation and stuff like that. But when it comes to like judicial effectiveness, when it comes to like representation of government, how much it translates what the people want to what they actually get, you see many different things. And I think that's something that's much more important to look at than just, we're living a bit, the standard of living is nicer.
I mean, there are absolute monarchies. The monarch might decide to change the law like that, and suddenly every single Westerner in Dubai now is a legal immigrant, and they can be sent to jail. Just the fact that they like to steal our technology and our know-how and our knowledge in order to build a nice skyscraper to make themselves look better, it doesn't mean that the state itself is better. Just what's the essence of the states? Well, it's still Islamic dictatorship, aren't they? Call them what you like. Polish your skyscraper as much as you like, but ultimately, the only free and democratic country in the Middle East is Israel.
And that's when you compare the Charter of Hamas and the founding documents of Israel, and you see it clearly laid out, and you see it acted on ever since. That's the crux of the matter, really.
And you see it in the actual implementation. I mean, at the end of the day, Constitution is a piece of paper unless you have the systems to enforce it, the culture to support it, and the people to respect it. So that's also well, that's something Hamas has. Hamas has been very respectful to its charter, so they definitely do not consider it just a piece of paper. So we've covered about half the issues I wanted to go through, but we will do a sort of a week looking back. So we might look at some of the things we've discussed today. We might look at it a bit from a bit broader perspective, or we might look at some of the things. I mean, we left out the media coverage. We talked about it a little bit. We sort of left out the way Israel has been responding or not responding. We left out the recent successes of Israel, which would also be good to talk about. And of course, we left out almost all the people. Your Finkelsteins, your Cheng Yugers, your Candace Owenses. So we might we'll definitely do more episodes about this.
And we've
And
also left,
yep.
sorry, just to add to you, we've also left out, of course, the many IDF soldiers who lost their lives in the course of this fight, over 700 of them, and of course the many tens of thousands of displaced people in the north of Israel still who can't live in their own homes. It's impossible for us to capture every element of this. That's why it extrapolates out into an entire year of coverage. But we recognize every one of these crucial elements to it. I'm sure we'll get to some of them in the course of the rest of the week.
And of course, the nightmare that was October 7th still carries on with the hostages, which are still held by the innocent Palestinians.
Anything you'd like to say before, and when can people find you?
Well, people can certainly find us on the Briefly Objective, the sister channel to this. The link is in the description below, where you'll find a really great summary of everything that's been on this channel. On this channel we're on now for the past year, because they're summarized into little bite-sized videos. You can play a chunk of them together. You can focus in on the key issues. It's a good reminder of everything that's happened across the past year and a way of familiarizing yourself with it all.
And also check out the ARCUK Substack. There are a few articles there that are quite interesting.
And with that, thank you everybody for joining us today. We'll see you tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Until then, bye-bye.